Welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for being with us this week. Great show today. Jack Knowlton, who heads up Saratoga Stable, owner of the Belmont champ, Tiz the Law, will be joining us in just a few moments. Later on, my friend and colleague from NBC Sports, Britney Eurton. We were the only two reporters on site at the Belmont last weekend, and we'll get her take on everything. Ben Chaffins, lead guitar as always. Ben, how are you?
Good, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. When we think about history of sports, outside of horse racing, you think of boxing and you think of baseball. When you can talk about going back centuries, plural. I know we just came off the 100th year of the NFL. College football, for some, have been around for a long time. But you think back, you can go back to the 1800s with boxing, baseball, and horse racing. We just came off the 152nd Belmont. Tiz the Law won it. He became the first New York bred since 1882 when Forrester did it. Yeah, 1882. The last time a New York bred had won the Belmont Stakes till this past weekend. So that gives you a little bit of the depth of horse racing at the Belmont. Also remember, it was 1.1 miles this year, but the Belmont, as we've talked about before, has not always been locked in at that distance. Matter of fact, in 1919, according to records, when Sir Barton won the Triple Crown, the Belmont was running 1.3 miles. Of course, since 1926, it's been 1.5 miles. People are used to that. They're used to the order of the Triple Crown. It's a new-looking Triple Crown this year. Tiz the Law is going to try to do something that no other horse has ever done. That's when it's that far apart, to be winning in June, to win in September, and win in October. How is he looking? How's everything going? How did it all come about, the relationship with Barclay Tagg and Saratoga Stable? Jack Knowlton joins us next to talk about it right here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. So glad that you've joined us this week and delighted to have this man back on. He was with us around April, not long after the Florida Derby, and he is with us now, and he is the head of Saratoga Stable, the owner of the Belmont champ, Tiz the Law. Welcome back, Jack Knowlton. Jack, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
A great performance the other day. Did you have any idea it was going to be what I thought looked like a very easy, confident win for Tiz the Law?
Well, it almost was a duplicate of the Florida Derby. You know, I had a lot of confidence. Once we, drew post 8, I thought that was going to give Manny Franco the opportunity to, put him where he likes to be, sitting, 2-3 lengths behind the leader, sitting outside, and when Manny gives him his cue, let him go after the leader and get to the wire first. And it absolutely worked to perfection. I had confidence in the horse, but more so probably because Barclay Tagg, and I've been with Barclay for 25 years, I don't think I've ever heard him as confident going into a race as he was this one with Tiz the Law.
Wow, and that's saying a lot because Barclay, my time around him, obviously you know him much, much better, is a man of few words and doesn't get too excited about things. At least that's my perspective.
I'd say that's absolutely true. And, even in the funny side days and the great wins we had with him, I don't ever remember Barclay, being as positive as he was. And he was right. And I think, people need to recognize the training feat that Barclay accomplished with this horse. I mean, the Florida Derby was the 28th of March, and he didn't have anywhere to run, really. People will say, well, you could have gone to the Arkansas Derby, but that didn't make a lot of sense to us. We wanted to come back to New York and have an opportunity to, make the Derby, hopefully, going through New York. And now we've got the Travers coming up.
And I want to get back to Barclay for a minute because some interviews that I did leading up to the race, people would ask about Barclay Tagg. If you're out in the sports world and not in the horse world, and the shows I was doing for NBC on the radio was sports shows. And they'd say, well, just how good is he? And I'd say, Barclay, to me, not everybody wants to be like basketball. I like basketball. Not everybody wants to be Mike Krzyzewski or John Calipari. There's a lot of people very content to have success in what they want to do and do it the way they want to in the place they want to. And I liken him to that guy that maybe just stays as a mid-major coach, let's say, but obviously could be a bigger coach if he sought that, much like obviously like Bob Baffert has, Wayne Lucas, Todd Pletcher, Chad Brown. Am I pretty close in that analogy?
Absolutely. Barkley, is historically not been what people would call a people person. He's a horse person. He and Robin both have devoted their lives 51 weeks a year, other than a 1-week vacation, to taking care of their horses. And he's not out, drinking with owners, partying with owners. He's taking care of his horses. They're up at 4:30 every morning. He doesn't have time for that. And that's why he's got a modest, 25-horse stable. After Funny Side, and all the publicity, not because he was seeking it, but people were seeking him out. And he had 100+ horses. He had horses at Saratoga, Belmont, Delaware, and Monmouth. And it just didn't work out. He'd leave Saratoga, on Sunday night and hit those tracks and then get back to Saratoga for the racing on Wednesday. But it just wasn't Barkley. He wants to be hands-on, and he is with every one of his horses, and it's been that way for the last 10 years or so.
And probably, and I'm not even kidding about this, Barkley might have enjoyed the social distancing with the very few people that were there at Belmont. I don't know, maybe 50, as much as anybody.
Well, there were some interviews that were done, and that's exactly what he said. And again, it was all about the horse. He said, his horses come out of the tunnel, and they're, 90,000 people screaming and this and that. He says, I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but you're absolutely right. He doesn't mind this, but hopefully we're not going to have that in any of the next 3 races. Certainly, I know Churchill's planning on having people. Maybe it's not going to be 160,000, but there'll be people there, and we're hoping that NYRA and New York State are going to be able to allow, owners and, at least some limited fans at the Saratoga meet, including the Travers this year.
And the Travers is next. I believe when we talked back in the first part of April, as you remember, just after the Florida Derby, you talked then about Belmont and Travers leading up to the Derby. I don't think the plan, I believe that's kind of been the plan all along. Am I right on that?
It has, absolutely. I mean, once he won the Florida Derby, we were still waiting to see what they were going to do with the Preakness, what were they going to do with the Travers, and then we got and the Belmont. So finally, everything kind of fell into place once those dates were announced, and it's going to work out fine. I mean, it's going to be another layoff. I mean, it's going to be 7 weeks this time, but he's won races this year off 7-week, 8-week, and 12-week layoffs. So we're not concerned. 7 weeks will be the shortest one that he's had this year. And then, I think, arguably we'll have a pretty fresh horse going into the Derby. That'll be 4 weeks, and then 4 weeks later to the Preakness.
We're talking with Jack Knowlton, the man who heads up Saratoga Stable. Of course, they became nationally known back in 2003 with Funny Side. And now you already gotten your triple crown, so to speak, Jack, with Tis the Law coming off the Belmont win. And, of course, you had the Derby and Preakness win with Funny Side. And to win the 3 majors, even 17 years apart, that's quite a feat. And a lot of owners who have been in the business a long time can't say that.
Well, I think there are very few that can say it, and very few trainers as well. I know that at least one place I saw with Barkley getting his personal triple crown, the only contemporary trainers that this article had, it was Nick Zito, Wayne Lucas, and Bob Baffert. And I've thought about it, haven't researched it, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody else who has achieved that.
The top of my head, that's all that comes to mind as well. I'm sure somebody will be looking it up now, but like for Todd Pletcher's never won the Preakness, for example.
Right.
So that would be a guy that maybe people will think of immediately, but that's one of the triple crowns that Todd has missed. And it says a lot for Barkley. It says a lot for you guys. one of my favorite moments outside of the obvious, how impressive Tiz the Law was in winning the Belmont, was the shot of you and the Saratoga stable people having the celebration that NBC puts on the air, I guess, Skyped or Zoomed in or however we got it in there. I'm not even sure, but it sure looked nice, and it was just great to see.
It was, it was the second best thing to being there. One of our partners is Bruce Cerrone, who owns Pinnell's Restaurant, a famous restaurant in Saratoga that his family has had since 1922. And he was able to accommodate a group of about 35 people. We had a little over half of our partner group there, and it was a tremendous day. And NBC did a great job. We kind of late in the game, they decided that they would actually have one of the local groups, Car Productions, that NBC works with quite a bit, come in, bring a camera in. So we didn't have to do it, I guess, even more modern way with zooming in. We did some of that, but then they actually had a camera right there. And it was a thrill for all of us, and a particular thrill for me when I got a chance to talk to Mike Tirico after the race.
And I guess it was a little better for you this time than having to walk out on your balcony just outside of Gulfstream Park and watching the race on TV, but listening to basically the sound of not much except ocean coming in and out as you had to do at the Florida Derby.
Well, that's right. It was just my wife and I, my grandson, and one of our other partners that was at our condo in Florida. And this, as I say, obviously we would have loved to have been at Belmont in a regular year, and we'd have been probably 70 or 80 strong and really whooping it up. But having, a big group together, 35 is a big group, unfortunately, in this day and age, what we're going through. And it was tremendous. And now we're just hoping beyond hope that we're going to actually be at the track and not be at Pinnell's for the Travers.
We're talking with Jack Knowlton, the owner of Saratoga Stable. He has put this all together. Great success with Funnyside, and now he has one of the best horses in the country, certainly the best 3-year-old in Belmont champ, Tiz the Law. We'll be back after a quick break with Jack right here on the Horse Racing Show. Don't go away. And welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Kenny Rice here with you. Glad to have Jack Knowlton back. I'm going to keep having him on, hopefully all the way through. He is the man that heads up Saratoga Stable. We talked after the Florida Derby win of Tiz the Law. We're talking now, of course, about Tiz the Law's very impressive performance in taking the first leg of this year's Triple Crown, the Belmont Stakes. And, with that, Jack, everybody's already wanting to speculate on what does it mean. Will there be, if it's a Triple Crown, will it be because it was a 1.8 mile at Belmont? You know all that. Do you even think about trying to figure out what it will all mean in history or anything at this moment?
Well, the one thing I'll say, I think that, anybody watching that race who would have a question of who would win the race were the 1.5 mile, I wouldn't understand it. Because when you watch him finish that race and just gallop out the way he galloped out, they could have gone around the track again, I think, and he'd probably still been ahead.
That's a great point. And that's a great point. The way he finished up and how fresh he looked as good after the race as he did before the race, I thought.
He is an amazing horse. Barkley and Robin talk about him. He's low-key, low maintenance, just does what you ask him to do. And, we've been very fortunate that he has, stayed sound. He had just one tiny bump in the road before the Florida Derby when he threw a shoe. And, but other than that, he's just been perfect. And we're hoping, beyond hope, we can keep him sound and healthy and, get through these next 4 races.
And as I tried to point out, when everybody, how people want to either revise history or in this case already start projecting history about this year's Triple Crown and how it plays out, I note that no trainer has ever had, so obviously it's an amazing feat to win those 3 races in 5 weeks and close out with the 1.5 mile Belmont. No doubt. That's why only 13 have done it. But no trainer has ever had to wait 77 days between the Belmont and the Derby. and then wait another month as it's going to work out this year to the Preakness. So you're talking about a horse that's going to be good, as Tiz the Law was in June, that still has to be good the first weekend of October. And that time span, I think, is as challenging to a trainer as getting ready for a mile and a half after the Preakness, in my humble opinion.
No, I would agree. I think, these are unprecedented times, and, hopefully there will never be another Triple Crown like this one. But it's a tremendous feat, if we're able to do it, to keep him ready and in top form for all those races. And I agree with you. We almost did it with Funny Side in a 5-week time frame, and I say to everybody, I'll go to my grave wondering what would have happened if it didn't rain 5 inches that day for the Belmont. But, when a horse gets really good, and we've seen it, happen with Bob Baffert, with Justify, he got really good at the right time, and, went through the 3 races in great form and won it. You look at the way the horses have fallen by the wayside this year, and just keeping these horses, healthy and sound is a big challenge. So being able to do it over this extended time frame, we'll see if Barkley can do it. But I will say, if there's any trainer out there that can, I have all the faith that Barkley's the one.
Well, you said you had a 25-year relationship with Barkley Tagg as a trainer for Saratoga. What was that like in the early going? Why did you choose Barkley and have stayed with him this long? Obviously, we know he's a good horseman, terrific horseman, but was there something early on that you saw that you thought, this is the guy that I'm going to stick with?
Well, absolutely. Back when Saratoga was really in its infancy, with my 5 friends from high school and 4 other people that were involved, we had, some pretty cheap New York breds, and we had a couple. We weren't doing very well. The trainer we had at that point wasn't doing very well. And one of my partners, the late Gus Williams, and I decided, we need to make a change, or we're going to have to get out of the business. So we identified 3 trainers that we thought, might fit the bill for Saratoga, as modest as, our operation was. And I made the phone calls. I called one and never got a call back. I called the second one, and he thanked me for calling, but he said, I'm full up. And when Barkley answered the phone, he said, I've got 2 empty stalls here at Belmont. If you want to come down this weekend and, move the horses over to my barn, I'll be happy to take them. So that was the beginning of the relationship. And, we had a couple of horses that were kind of okay, but Barkley had an owner that didn't want to take a horse to Florida. She was a turf mare, and the owner had put her in 35,000 claimer at Belmont, and told Barkley, I'm not going to send her to Florida. I don't want to spend the money. Barkley had told him, I think she'll win down there, and you should do it. But he wouldn't do it. So Barkley, asked the guy, said, would you, sell this to the guys from Saratoga? And the guy said, yeah, $40,000, I'll sell her. So he did. And she was the horse that ran after Barkley had identified Funny Side in December of 2001, that he wanted $50,000 at that point. We didn't have money. By February, she ran. She got claimed for 62.5, ran second in a race. We had the money to pay Tony Everhart $75,000 for Funny Side. Well, as they say, the rest is history.
Oh, it is. What history that Saratoga has made under the leadership of Jack Knowlton, who started Saratoga, I believe, around 1995. And is this right? To this day, you only deal with New York breds, as obviously Funny Side was and Tiz the Law is?
I can't remember. I think way back when, we might have bought one non-New York bred, but in probably the last 15 years, it's all New York breds all the time. 1, maybe 2 a year is typically what we do. 4-horse stable. We just increased it 50%. We bought a couple horses down at the sale in Ocala a couple of weeks ago.
Is that just New York pride, or you just have a feeling for New York breds, or they just have a really good program in the state?
Well, the program is great. And, we're not a big budget operation. Funny Side we bought for $75,000 after missing him at the Traffic tipped the New York bred sale in Saratoga for $22,000, and then Tiz we bought him for $110,000. The most we've ever spent for a New York bred, and we did it twice, was $180,000. Neither one of them turned out to be very good. So we look at the New York program, the New York stakes that you have, that you get to run maiden, first level allowance, second level allowance against New York breds, and purses are good in New York. So we find that it gives you the best chance to have some success. And fortunately, there are a lot of New York bred races that get run in New York. We have a lot of partners that are from New York and in the area, although in recent years, it's kind of a national group now. But everybody's looking on simulcast, so it all works out.
Jack, we talked about the Travers. Next up for Tiz the Law. Do you have any inside scoop here that there might be a chance there will be some people, at least the owners, that will be allowed to go to Saratoga?
Yeah, I mean, we've had discussions with NYRA. I mean, we were hoping that we might have an opportunity to go to the Belmont, but NYRA and the state just weren't able to work out an arrangement that the state felt comfortable with from a safety standpoint. But I know that they are working with the state on getting owners and some fans into Saratoga. I've heard some different scenarios, maybe not right at the beginning of the meet, but a couple of weeks in, and so we'll see. But I am cautiously optimistic that it will happen. I just can't imagine being in Saratoga 40 days and not being able to be at that racetrack, because last year I was there 39 out of the 40.
I was going to say, I think I always see you at Saratoga.
Absolutely. I live about 5 minutes from the track.
Now, do you get a chance? Can you go to the barn area? And I guess
No.
I should probably know this. You can't do anything, right? You just
No.
have Funny Side in pictures. I mean, Tiz the Law in pictures.
I mean, I haven't seen him since I saw him breeze before the Florida Derby in early to mid-March, before they shut everything down. He'd breeze once a week up at Palm Meadows, and I'd, always take the ride up, about a 45-minute to an hour ride from my condo, and, see him breeze in the morning. But, when they shut down everything, it was shut down, and I couldn't even do that any longer.
You told me a few weeks back that you'd already got that yellow school bus reserved for the first Saturday in Louisville for the Kentucky Derby. Is that right?
It may have to be two, with all the social distancing and all the new fans that we have with Tiz, but absolutely. And we're just getting ready to get our next shirt for Tiz the Law out, and it says, "Fire up the bus," and there's a sign that points toward Louisville.
Oh, that's great. And I mean, is it tough to rent a school bus? I've never tried to. I was just curious. Who do you call schoolbusrentals.com, or how do you?
No, there are a lot of school buses that are available in Louisville, but we're going back to the same company. And there, even NBC in the telecast the other day, they pulled out the old clips and they showed the bus a couple of times.
Yeah, I know. In the first report I did, where I talked about social distancing, and boy, Tiz the Law's great at social distancing, isn't he? They can't keep close to him.
Well, we like that, and let's hope he can stay that way.
Yeah, because I remember I said go back 17 years, and if people probably remember anything about Saratoga other than Funny Side, it's the yellow school bus.
There's no question. I have people ask about that all the time, and there's still people that think that we came all the way from New York in a school bus to Louisville. It was only from a hotel. It was about 3 miles from the Galt House to Churchill, but the way that some people still think that the story was that we came all the way in a school bus, but that wasn't true.
That's a great story, though, isn't it? Sometimes, those legendary stories, they keep growing, even if they're totally wrong. But the deal is, right, you got a better deal on the school bus than one of those luxury vans, luxury buses.
It was $3,600 that the hotel said it would cost to get, a real vehicle, a real bus. And they asked, when my partner, the late Dave Mann, was talking to them about it, and he said, that seems like a lot of money to, just be going like 3 miles each way. And they said, well, how much pride have you got? And Dave says, not much. I said, well, let's give you a call back. And they said, when they called back, we can get your school bus for $1,300. Dave said, take it. So that's the story of how Saratoga got famous for its school bus.
That is a great story. And you certainly had a great horse with Funny Side. And it looks like a super horse right now in Tiz the Law. And I can't thank you enough for your time and your consideration throughout all this. And best wishes the rest of the way on to the Travers.
Thank you. It's always great being with you, Kenny. And hopefully we'll see you up here in Saratoga.
I do hope we see each other in person for sure for the Travers. Thank you again. Jack.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, Jack heads up Saratoga Stables. They've won the Triple Crown. Sort of, too, with Funny Side, of course, the Derby and the Preakness, and now Tiz the Law just looks spectacular in winning the Belmont. We'll have more coming up on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Really happy to have this lady with us. She's been on before. I just got through working with her just a few days ago at Belmont Park for NBC. You see her on NBC. You see her on TVG. She is Britney Eurton. Well, yeah, Britney, how you been?
I've been good. Just got to watch the show last night, kind of adjusting to getting back home. But it was so wonderful to be with you live on site last weekend.
People have asked me, so I want to ask you first, what was it like to be up there where it was basically you, me, a few other print reporters and a few other electronic media guys that got in, and basically trainers and grooms and the horses?
I think the consensus from all of us was it was strange. It was slightly eerie. Belmont Park is such a big facility that even when there are people there, you can rarely fill up the entire grandstand because it's so huge. You go to the very, very far end, when they're coming around the far turn. But the energy was different. I think for me, the strangest part was after the race, you've got Tiz the Law crossing the wire. You can hear Manny Franco screaming out of joy. And I think that was the strangest moment for me because normally you wouldn't be able to hear that. So maybe that was kind of a cool moment about not having the fans there, as you could hear that elation from Manny Franco, but also you didn't have the roar of the crowd. And that was so strange to me for that big of a race. But I think you and I had been talking about this. It definitely made it easier to maneuver our way around the track.
I know it. That's what I told somebody. They had me on a radio show the other day. They said, what was it like? And I said, yeah, well, it's different. They said, how about, for you? I said, for me, it was a perfect working condition because I could come, I could go. I didn't have to squeeze between people for an interview. And we certainly could find all the connections easy, couldn't we?
Exactly. It's as if we weren't running around. I got away with wearing my sneakers most of the time because I knew nobody was really going to see me. It was different, but it was something I was talking to our associate producer about, Amy Zimmerman, just last night because I rewatched the show. And I don't know if you do this, but we can all be our own harshest critic. And I said, I feel like I was a little stiff in the show. And she said, I think you feed off of the energy of the people around you. And maybe the chaos brings, almost relaxes you. And I thought that is such an interesting perspective. And I think she's right. So from a broadcasting standpoint, I actually think having that energy around me makes it easier to relay that to an audience. So we're going to have to get me especially creative when we're continuing to covering these shows without any spectators and kind of really trying to keep that energy high without that group of people, the crowd, the fans around us.
Did I do okay? No, I'm just kidding.
You did great.
I'm just kidding. It was fun.
You are number one storyteller. I'm always trying to compare myself to you, Kenny Rice.
Now, Britney, people are listening to this. They go, I used to like this show, and now look at this guy. He's groveling. He wants praise. No, it's always the whole team. The whole team. Seriously, it was a pleasure. I was talking earlier with Jack Knowlton, and he mentioned, and I can't remember a year when so many of the stars have been sidelined, either retired like Nadal or put on the sideline like Charlatan, well, Bayou, we can go down the list of Maxfield, because of injuries at this time of the year. I mean, it's really been different. I think it says a lot that Tiz the Law is not only running well, but he's been healthy enough to run well.
He has been Mr. Consistent. And I think that you have to give so much credit to his trainer, Barclay Tagg. He's been very patient. He's placed him appropriately. He missed the Breeders' Cup purely because he didn't want to ship a young horse all the way to California because they had their sights set on a 3-year-old year. And that is not an easy call to make. To miss a big race like that with a talented 2-year-old. I give him so much credit. What a sensational horseman he is. And this horse, we were talking about it when he came out onto the track, he looked the picture of perfection, but it's as if he just is mentally more mature than every other horse out there. He takes everything in stride, and he proved that on Saturday. He deserves to be the favorite for the Kentucky Derby, and if he can stay healthy and in his best form the entire year, we could rightly see a 2020 Triple Crown winner.
We're talking with Britney Eurton of NBC and TVG from her home in Los Angeles. You mentioned Triple Crown, and we discussed it in depth at during the telecast on Saturday at NBC. Is it too much to try to dissect it all and try to start worrying about asterisks? Because, like you say, to me, that 77 days between the Belmont and the Derby, and then add another month to October, it's going to take. I think it's going to be a training feat, and you know this better than I do, that would be equal to keeping a horse healthy for 5 weeks for that grueling Triple Crown to keep one from June to October healthy and ready to run.
I couldn't agree with you more. I almost think that 15 weeks for a Triple Crown, this makes it possibly more difficult because you have to keep, as I said on the show, a horse healthy and in their peak form for this extended amount of time. And we've already seen some of the top horses go by the wayside because of injury and the delay, whereas, Charlatan and Nadal could have been running for Kentucky Derby glory like they did in the Arkansas Derby. So the asterisk, I don't know. It was best said, I thought, by Tim Layden in the essay on the show. He said, this is not the Triple Crown, but it's a Triple Crown. I don't think anything should be taken away from if a horse is able to complete that feat. It's unique. It's different. You won't put it alongside Secretariat just because it's a different Triple Crown, but it is still a Triple Crown. That's how I see it.
And as being astute like you are in judging horses, you were pretty impressed with Tiz the Law. We can be in a hypothetical and say some other horses very good were healthy. I think it would have taken a real good effort to beat him the way he ran the other day.
I agree. I think him coming out onto the track, he's just built like a powerful racehorse. And you can see a couple of other horses were getting a little warm around the neck, a little warm behind. Nothing bothered him. And I said this to Barclay Tagg, he looked like a man amongst boys. And I'm not really saying size. I mean more so his demeanor and the way that he carried himself from the barn to the paddock, from the paddock to the track, and all the way around the track. And he is going to face some tough horses. You're going to see horses progressing throughout the year. We might see a horse like Cezanne for Bob Baffert, wherever he ends up next. If they clash in the Kentucky Derby, all of these late bloomers that are going to come and tackle on Tiz the Law. But some people say he didn't face the toughest field. Well, maybe he didn't, but he's beating what he has to face. And I think you have to give him respect for what he's done.
Well put. We're talking with Britney Eurton. We'll be back with more with Britney right here on the Horse Racing Show. Do not go away. And welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Kenny Rice here with you. Delighted to have this person that I just really enjoy working with and hanging out with. Britney Eurton from NBC Sports and from TVG. Basically, if you tune in a horse race of any kind, she's on it. She's
oh, the poor people watching.
The ubiquitous Britney Eurton. Britney, let me ask you about your dad, Peter. And, of course, coming into this season, he had the 2-year-old champ in Storm the Court, the winner of the Breeders' Cup. And you know about trying to keep horses healthy, and your dad's been trying to do that to get ready to map out races and all. How are things in the Eurton barn?
Things in the Eurton barn are good. It's been a big adjustment for any trainer because you had a lot of uncertainty in the beginning of the year. Trainers work backwards from a race. So they want to get the horse prepped to peak on that day. And when you don't know when that day is or what race you're pointing towards, it makes the training regime a little bit more difficult. Do you pull back on horses? Do you take them out of training? Do you keep them in a consistent training regime in case the race comes up? So I think there was a lot of uncertainty for everybody in the beginning of the year, but he kept Storm the court in training, and Storm still has something to prove. We are very aware of that. Take nothing away from what he did his 2-year-old year. He beat who he had to on the day at 45-1. But yeah, he still has to show that 2-year-old form translated to his 3-year-old form. And I think even when you look at him physically, he is not the largest animal, say, when you compare him to Nadal. He ran against Nadal in the Arkansas Derby. And that's something that I really noticed is you are now facing these 3-year-olds that are built. They are strong. They are powerful. And he didn't necessarily grow into that type of horse. But his mentality is great. He's running in the Ohio Derby this weekend, and they're going to give him one more shot. They're going to give him one more shot against that type of competition. And if it's too much for him, I'm sure that the owners and my dad will, pull heads together and decide which direction they want to go with him. He has so much turf breeding. Owners are going to hate me for saying this, but I would love to eventually see him on turf, much like his father. I think that he could really excel there, but you have to give him that shot, especially with all of the defections that we've seen this year. He deserves the opportunity.
And exactly, and like you mentioned, such a different year where suddenly like Los Alamitos and the Ohio Derby and the Indiana Derby, and you'd start thinking Ellis Park, there's places that are major prep stops now on the way to Kentucky that you would never think of in the past.
Absolutely. You have the shared belief at Del Mar that's going to likely draw Honor AP, the second best 3-year-old in the country right now, that likely wouldn't have gotten necessarily a huge race or a big draw because it wasn't a prep for a major race down the road, but now it is. Now it's a prep for the Kentucky Derby with points on the line. You're going to see the Travers, the Haskell, those major races have added significance. Not that they need it because they're standalone, incredibly prestigious races, but this year has been so strange, and it goes to show that horsemen, I think, are pretty darn good at adjusting and calling audibles, finding places that fit for their horses to adjust to this new schedule. So I'm thrilled to see which 20 horses we do end up seeing in the starting gate the first Saturday in September, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't think we'll have 20. That's just a guess. Maybe we will. I hope there's 20 healthy horses to run in that Derby.
Well, I think that you will have, if owners find themselves within that 20 bracket, I think they're going to run because it still is the Kentucky Derby. Whether it's in May or September, it still has and should have all the prestige of the Run for Roses. So I think you might not see as competitive as a field, but then who knows when you have these horses that just started running like Uncle Chuck for Bob Baffert that I know we've been talking about a little bit.
Excellent point as always, Brittany. That's why I defer to you with the horse knowledge.
No.
And with that, I will continue with talking about performances. Gamine winning the Acorn. And you got to wonder, how does this filly fit in with this 3-year-old group? I'm putting her in the top 10 this week in that NTRA poll.
Wow, she was sensational, wasn't she? I rewatched it and seeing the overhead view of her pulling away. And you could see she got a little, I don't know if it was distracted or bored because she was opening up by so much. So she was doing a little weaving down the stretch, but that may have been because she was all by herself. She was sensational. I remember interviewing Bob Baffert before she debuted at Santa Anita. He also had, I believe, Authentic and 1,000 Words running that day. And he said that he was more nervous for her running than he was the boys later in the afternoon. I mean, Kenny, you've interviewed Bob so many times. How do you read that? Did he know something special was on the way?
You know what, Brittany, that's a good point. I think he did. He'll play it as close to the vest as possible, as most trainers. But, you've been around him so much, too. When Bob starts, there's a little hesitation or a little smile. Even just a little shrug and, how he can be flippant at times. I think that says a whole lot more than him coming out and say, hey, keep an eye on this filly. To me, I read it that way.
Absolutely. And then after she ran, he said, I think she could be a superstar. And you don't often hear him say that. At least I don't. So she's living up to expectations. Wow. That was sensational. We could actually have a really competitive, exciting Kentucky Oaks this year with her, Swiss Skydiver, who has been ultra consistent for Kenny McPeak. You also have Venetian Harbor, who Richard Baltus was giving a little bit of extra time to. I don't know if we'll see British Idiom back in time. I don't think so. But there's a lot of really talented females. We should not overlook them.
No, not at all. And I think you're right. And it'll be curious how it shakes out. Will we just have a spectacular Oaks, or will we see maybe one or two of those fillies saying, the way it's kind of shaking out with the boys this year, I don't know if there's that many that much better, and we'll take a shot here.
But they'd have to get the points. That's the thing.
The points is going to be the toughest thing. So you wonder at what time do they start making that decision? That's going to be tough, isn't it?
Well, Bob said, because everybody was talking about her running in a derby, I read a quote from him that said, well, I didn't nominate her. So to me, that said he's not running against the boys.
Yeah. Well, Britney, your insight is always valuable and appreciated, and it's always great to see you. And I've had a blast working with you up there and going out to King Umberto's afterwards for dinner. And I look forward to
that was too much fun.
Well,
Thank you for taking me. It was my first time, and like I said in my post, the company was even better than the food, and that's saying something.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Greg Magruder, for joining us. We had a great time up there, always. Britney, I look forward to seeing you down the road very soon, and best wishes to your dad as Storm the Court this weekend.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you. Will you be on site this weekend?
I will be, yes, I'll be up there. It's going to be a big weekend, the Stephen Foster and the Fleur-de-Lis. Not that it always isn't big, but I think maybe as big as we've seen in a long time with the company that's going to be in there.
Oh, yeah, Fleur-de-Lis, Midnight Bizou, possibly one of the best horses in the country against the fast Serengeti Empress. I cannot wait. So I will be watching you this weekend.
All right, Brittany, so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny.
All right, Brittany Eurton from NBC Sports. Stay with us. There's more on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode 73, by the way, and you can go to YouTube and look up past interviews that we've had. Like you might want to listen again to Jack Knowlton. It was great catching up with him. But listen to what he said just after the Florida Derby, the first weekend of we had him on in April. It's pretty much what he said now. They had Tiz the Law planned out for the Belmont and then for the Travers and then the Kentucky Derby. And obviously after that great performance in the Belmont, everything's falling into place. And Brittany Eurton, who's a good friend, and I really enjoy working with her at NBC with great insight as well, especially on what's going to happen with some of these fillies because they'll have to run in some races against the boys to get points. Will anybody even try that now? When you think that there's a couple out there that'd be really interesting to see that matchup. But again, that's what makes a horse race. As far as the Belmont, my take on it, it was, of course, different. What I've missed the most is when the horses are first coming into that paddock. It's about 300 yards, 3 football fields from walking over at the holding barn, coming down, they come through this tunnel, they come back up, and as they're coming into the light and getting closer, some of the fans in the paddock can see them. And there's literally been thousands of people there gathered around to scream and cheer for the horses. And this year it was, of course, silent. Just a few media people, a few of the track workers that were there, along, of course, with the trainers and along with their grooms. Todd Pletcher, the great trainer, told me, and it's a wonderful line. He said, being here in New York at this stage, I wouldn't even mind hearing somebody boo me, at least just hear a different voice. And that's probably what would be echoed by many who were there. But it was a great day and a great race and a great performance by Tiz the Law, who gets ready now next up for the Travers. Thank you for being with us, Ben Chaffins. Thank you. Be sure to tune in again next week. I'm Kenny Rice. This is the Horse Racing Show.